It's good to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back with Hometown Commander Break for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I take my first pass at the commander for us on a budget. This time, no budget. On my quest to brew the magic. Well, you know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing. That's what we're back to do today. That deck list is going to be down in the description for you below. As well as I'd really appreciate if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, consider out checking out those links in the description. I'd really appreciate it. But today, we're kind of throwing our normal budget out the window, and that's because this brews actually was the a version of this deck I tried to make for myself. Today we're talking about the Necrobloom, a 4-mana Abzin legendary plant. With landfall, whenever a land comes in, you could make a 0/1 plant token, but if you have 7 or more lands with different names, you get a 2/2 zombie instead. This is kind of that Field of the Dead ability, but you add a plant on the low end. If you don't, if you have less than the 7. And then it gives the ability for all your land cards in your graveyard to have dredge too. Dredge means that at any time you would draw a card, instead you can mill 2 cards from your library and then put that land back into your hand. So the Necrobloom is a very interesting commander, and I think the reason I wanted to cover the Necrobloom primarily is because we have all these Jund sacrifice graveyard decks running around with the new Precon. And I think the Necrobloom, to me, does the graveyard game better. But the question is, does it fit the style of landfall that I want? I've talked about my usage of my Taval deck from the Sultai Taval from the Tarkir Dragonstorm Commander deck, and how it's kind of become this graveyard deck. And I wanted to kind of do more of a lands focused deck. So that's the goal of the Necrobloom, to try to play with this lands graveyard deck style and to have some fun with it. Again, no budget because I'm brewing this for myself, and let's have some fun. I want to say a quick thank you to the channel members. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you're interested in seeing all the videos just a little bit early for just $1 a month, consider checking that out down below. Well, all right. It's pretty obvious that when your commander has landfall on it, we're going to care about landfall. And what we're mainly trying to do here is play pieces that are going to work great alongside Necrobloom to get our strategy done. Nissa gets a loyalty counter every time land comes in, and she can use her -5 to get creatures back from your graveyard or your hand onto the battlefield, as long as their mana value is less than equal to the number of lands you control with a couple counters on them. Avenger of Zendikar comes in and makes a bunch of plants, just like Necrobloom does, but then whenever a land comes in, you put a counter on each plant you control. Again, great if we've already made a few plants with Necrobloom, right? Now we can grow them and make them a threat other than being just a no-one. Azusa may not have landfall printed on it, but it's a key ability in our deck, allowing us to play multiple lands on each of our turns, and in fact, 2 more. And this is a huge deal when we start to talk about the loop we're hoping to to get into, of playing lands from our graveyard and things like that. The new Might Form Harmonizer, whenever a land comes in, double the power of target creature you control. Great if we can find something with Trample or some Evasion to really get it in and start our opponents having to deal with it. Mossborn Hydra doubles the number of counters on it every time a land comes in. This is one of the creatures we could use to double with Might Form to make it a real threat. Scootsworm makes a 1/1 insect whenever a land comes in. Unless we have 6 or more lands, then it makes another copy of itself, just exponentially getting out of control. Tifa, another great landfall threat for us. Whenever a land comes in, you double Tifa's power until end of turn, making her realistically very large on a turn where we can play multiple lands and make her a real threat. Tireless Revisor can make us treasures as lands come in. Great if your lands are coming in tap, because then the treasure can still be used for mana. And then Traveling Chocobo, we can look at the top card of our library anytime. We can play lands and cast birds from the top, but the ability we really care about with Chocobo is if a land would come in, would trigger the ability of a permanent we control, it triggers the additional time. So great for Necrobloom, great for a lot of these other support pieces, and just getting more and more value for us. Chocobo Racetrack makes a 2/2 bird with a landfall ability that says whenever a land comes in, token gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Again, I really like this ability because on the turns where we're playing multiple lands, these 2/2s are going to pretty quickly turn into 5/2s, 6/2s, and become real threats. Exploration lets us play another land in each of our turns. And then Hagra, one of our other key landfall abilities. Have each opponent lose one and we gain one whenever a land comes in. Again, a really nice ability to have at our disposal. But since our commander is giving all of the land cards and our graveyard dredge, and we care about the graveyard, we probably should want to interact with the graveyard, right? And the key creatures we really want to see here, part of our kind of package we want to put together, are these creatures that let us play lands from our graveyard. You see that on Ancient Green Warden, Ice Till Explorer, Ramanap Excavator. Let's just play lands out of our graveyard. Now, that's good on its own, because then that means we can replay certain key lands, like lands that sacrifice themselves to go get other lands, getting us additional triggers each turn, and allowing us to do it over and over again, or dredge lands into the graveyard and replay them back out of the graveyard with Necrobloom's ability, right? There's a lot of lines you can go. Now, Green Warden adds some extra value in that it kind of gives that Traveling Chocobo ability to double up our landfall triggers as lands come in. Ice Till Explorer lets us play an additional land, so it kind of adds that exploration ability. And whenever a land comes in, we mill a card, filling up our graveyard. The Gitrog lets us play an additional lands on each of our turns, and has a pretty fun interaction with the Necrobloom. Whenever one or more lands are put into our graveyard from anywhere, we draw a card, meaning that you could potentially get on a pretty fun dredge loop to fill up your graveyard. The only caveat to Gitrog is that at the start of our upkeep, we have to sack it unless we sack a land. And most time we don't mind sacking a land because we have plenty of ways to get our lands back from the graveyard. Titania is going to care about our lands going to the graveyard. Whenever land we control from the battlefield goes to the graveyard, we get a 5/3 elemental token. So it kind of cares right about our lands going that way. We're going to strive to do that a ton. Life for the Loam lets us get lands from our graveyard back to our hand, and does give us the option to dredge Life from the Loam to mill to get it back. And remember that because it says up to 3, you can technically loam with no targets, just to put it back in your graveyard to grave to dredge if you want to. Conduit of Worlds and Walk-in Closet are both going to, again, let us play lands from our graveyard. Conduit and Walk-in both give us kind of an option to play things out of our graveyard. Conduit lets us tap to play a permanent of our graveyard, but it's the only thing we can cast that turn. Forgotten Cellar lets us play spells only that turn for 5 mana. And then Exploration Broodship kind of gives us a little bit of the best of both worlds. So it's one of the new spacecrafts with Station. When you station up to 3, it becomes a copy of Exploration, letting you play additional land in each of your turns. But we can get it up to 8. It lets us play a permanent from our graveyard each one of our turns by just sacrificing a land addition to its other costs. Again, great because it'll trigger anything that happens on sacrificing lands, and it lets us get key things back from our graveyard that either gets removed or dredged or milled with any of our other abilities. But if you know me, I love my tokens, and we're in a deck that's trying to print tokens, so of course we're going to care about them. Elspeth can double up how many tokens we make, and has a great suite of abilities, especially getting those tokens in the air with her 0. Chatterfang adds some fun, making a number of squirrels every time you make any number of tokens, and has some fun interactions with it. Enduring Vitality is going to let all of our creatures tap for mana. Really useful to potentially get out multiple spells per turn and set up if we want to before our lands come in, or we do a lot of other things. Note that it's going to give those creatures haste to tap for mana, but still very useful turn over turn. Kumbal is going to start damaging our opponents whenever one or more tokens enter the battlefield under our control. Each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. Note that it's going to be for each trigger. So, like, let's say we have a card that makes two 1/1 insects like Scootsworm. Let's say one Scootsworm made 2 tokens. It's only going to go off once, but for every trigger of Scootsworm, it's going to go off. Kumbal can really get out of hand. Same thing with Mirkwood Bats. Whenever we would make a token, lose a life. That doesn't say one or more tokens. That says whenever you create a token. So the more tokens you're making, the more damage. By that I mean life loss that Mirkwood Bats is just handing out. Cathar's Crusade can make all these tokens a threat, putting counters on our entire board, and making every token we make more of a threat for our opponents. Insidious Roots allows them all to tap for a mana of any color, all of our creature tokens. And then if we get creatures back out of our graveyard, we get to get plants and put counters on all our plants. On Wings of Gold is going to get all of our tokens into the air and give them a buff, a nice piece of evasion when we want to turn them forward and start attacking. It also says whenever one or more cards leave our graveyard, we get to make a zombie token. So that's probably going to happen a lot. That's what our deck's trying to do, is get lands in and out of the graveyard. So on Wings of Gold is going to make us some zombie tokens as well. And then we do have a couple zombies in the deck, but not really anything relevantly there. Meat Hook can come in as a nice little board wipe, giving everything minus X on the turn. The ability we really care about is the first one. Every time a creature we control dies, each opponent loses a life. So as we go into some of our lines to sacrifice our creatures for things, Meat Hook can start draining our opponents as our creatures are dying, or if they wipe the board, right? There's two combos that I want to talk about in the deck in a sense of 2 and or 3 card combos. Now, I've said it before on the show when it comes to talking about combos, and I'll say it again. It's I have a little bit of a disagreement with the bracket system over where combos are. Like, I think this deck probably leans more towards a 4 than a 3. But a combo like Chatterflang and Pills Plunderer, a combo that will allow you to make basically an infinite amount of squirrels, and just use Chatterfang to basically get rid of all your opponent's creatures, is great, but it doesn't end the game. So to me, I mean, it's a great combo, and it's probably a bracket 3 combo, but I don't know if it's a bracket 4 combo, right? And that's where I think a lot of the line from this deck's going to go. I'd probably play it in 4 pods because there's enough money in the deck and we've got enough lines in it. But what I'm going to guess when I share this deck list is Moxfield's going to say it's a 3 and Architect's going to say it's a 4. So it kind of sits somewhere in there, and it's going to come down to our judgment right on that. Now, in my play group, this is going to get played against probably other decks that are closer to a 4 anyway. But, it's just important to keep that in the back of your mind. But the big combo, or if you want to call it that, it's really not, but it kind of is using Scape Shift and then Splendid Reclamation. But the nice part is just in Tarkir, we got kind of a reprint of Splendid Reclamation, a new one in Will of the Sultai. So basically how this is going to work is we're going to use Scape Shift to sacrifice all of the lands we want to go get that many lands from our deck. We get all those landfall triggers. All the things happen when either those lands come in or those lands hit the graveyard. And then whether immediately right after, if we floated the mana, or on a future turn, we use Splendid Reclamation or Will of the Sultai to get all of our lands from our graveyard back to the battlefield tapped. Again, getting all of those abilities when those lands come in and just farming all of these triggers. Now, the difference between Will of the Sultai and Splendid Rec is that Will of the Sultai actually lets you, as long as you control a commander, put a bunch of counters on a creature, works the number of lands you control after you do it, and give it trample. So it can actually give a creature and or a Necrobloom, right, a real threat for commander damage. But again, sack as much as you want, get them back out of your deck, get them back from the yard. Note that these can also just be used to, if you have a big graveyard, let's say we went out a Dredge Train with Gitrog and we have a bunch of lands in our graveyard, well, these can just get all our lands from our graveyard back. It doesn't have to be a Scape Shift, line to do it, but it is probably most likely going to follow something like a Scape Shift to do it. But I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is my first pass in a while at Necrobloom. And I think going into testing, there's really truthfully 2 things I'm looking at. One, do I have enough way to sacrifice creatures profitably? We're playing the Phyrexian Altars. We're playing things like that. Do we want something like Altar Dementia? I can see a world where we might make enough tokens to just truthfully mill people out with Altar of Dementia. So I guess that is an option we get in on top. Crucible, of course, came in the secret layer for World Shaper, which is why I had kind of thought about putting it in. But I think I like Conduit just a little bit better. Truthfully, I kind of feel like we have enough play lands from our graveyard abilities. We're not hurting for them, but I have a feeling in testing we could realize, maybe one more is the answer, and Crucible is there for that. And then I love the look of Squandered Resources. My only problem with Squandered Resources is it is on the reserve list. Its price sits at $70, but it's a very good card for $70. You sack a land to get a mana of any color that it could produce. That land goes to your graveyard. You can then get it back with these abilities. I think Squandered's a really good card. I was just trying to avoid it since it's a reserve list card, but I have a gut feeling it'll come back in because it'll really help us with some of these loops that we really want to accomplish. But let's do what we love the most on the channel and get into our playtest. Remember, the goal of playtests on our channel is not to find magical Christmas land. It's not just to show off all our best plays, but it's to get in some gameplay scenarios and kind of take a look at what hands are we looking to keep and how are we looking to set up our board. Here we got a 4-lander. We see Ice Till, a card that's so great, letting you play lands from your graveyard. Works really well with the Necrobloom. As long as you can get a land into your graveyard, great. You can dredge more in there. Pitiless Plunderer, whenever creatures die, making the treasures. And then Walk-in Closet, letting us play lands from the graveyards. We have plenty of ways to get things back from the graveyard. The question, right, is just how we take advantage of it. I don't want to run this Riveteer's Outlook out just quite yet. The reason there is because it's when it comes in, it's going to get me a landfall trigger, and then when it sacrifices and gets a basic land, it's going to get me a landfall trigger. And I really want to profit from that landfalls as much as I can. I don't want to give that up. Here I'm thinking about just getting Hagra in. That way as we're getting these things in, we're getting value. And I think it's just the Peatland, a damage there, and the Necrobloom. I don't want to play Azusa just yet since I had a couple lands to play. I'd rather wait and make sure we're getting lots of profit from them. Turn 5, we see that new Avendo that can get up into a Gaia's Cradle, which is going to be very useful right when we're making a ton of tokens. So my thought here is Silent Clearing. That's going to trigger here and get us a plant. Life lost there. Then my thought is Azusa, right? Which gives me 2 additional land drops. Riveteer's Outlook, which comes in, trigger on the Hagra and a plant, and then automatically sacrifices itself to go get any of them from our deck. So we've got two green sources, 3 black sources, 2 white sources. I think the answer is a forest, just since we have that Ice Till in our hand. Another landfall trigger, plant, Hagra trigger. And now I've just got 2 mana left, so nothing too killer. That was land 1 and land 2, so we'll just put a Vendo down for land 3, trigger. And this will be a zombie, because I do have 7, right, of lands of different names. But now, right, a Vendo comes in tap. Hopefully we can start stationing it. And now we're looking to be in pretty good shape. So the Silent Clearing and the Peatland are really interesting lands because you can pay 1, tap, and sack them to draw cards. This is really useful with something like Walk-in Closet or Ice Till, right? Because then you can sack them, draw, and then replay them back out of your graveyard. So now as it comes to our turn, do we have a choice? Do we bring this Outlook back to our hand and dredge a couple? Or do we immediately go in the Ice Till and just play Outlook out of it? So this is where I think one of the lines that's really important with Necrobloom and decks like this. I can just play Outlook time and time again back out of my graveyard. Note that it doesn't have to go get something. Like, I could run out of basics and Riveteers will still sacrifice itself and go look. But the nice part here is if I play Riveteers Outlook for all 3 of my land drops this turn, here's with Ice Till. Actually, I apologize. It'll be 4 if I let's say I leave it there, right? Let's just say I leave it there. Well, it worked out even better because I got a exploration. Well, let's play the exploration. Let's play the Walk-in Closet, play the exploration. Play the Ice Till. So that's 5 mana. I've only got 2 left. So okay, I wanted to make sure we played a little bit of redundancy as well. We just don't have any redundancy on playing lands from our graveyard. But I've got 1 normal land drop, 2 from Azusa, 1 from Ice Till, 1 from Exploration. So I can play this Outlook out of my deck, graveyard 5 times this turn. On all 5 of those plays, I'm going to get a zombie from Necrobloom. I'm going to get a trigger from Hagra, and I'm going to get a trigger from Ice Till to explore to mill me a card. But Outlook's going to sacrifice itself, go find me either a swamp or a forest in this case, get it to the battlefield, and then that land is going to then trigger Hagra, Ice Till that. So we can step through it if we want to, but like truthfully, I think this is where your end game's going to start. I'm gonna net 10 zombies. I'm gonna net 10 triggers of Hagra, and I'm gonna mill 10 cards. So at this point, the question becomes, well, what can I do with that? Well, I can basically just suit up a Vendo this turn, right? Just station it up. It's good to go. And then I just need to untap. I've got 10 extra cards in my graveyard, and I think we're in a good spot. I'm not going to step it out because I think we can kind of say this is where I think we learn even more on our own, figuring out how to, go from there. But the truth is, by milling 10 cards and having then enough mana to play the Forgotten Cellar and open up our entire graveyard, I think we're just in good shape to do that. Now, I guess the next question is, do I have 5 swamps and forests? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have plenty in there to go get. I don't want to I guess I don't want to use the word bore. Like, I don't want to bore you stepping through the combo. Like, it's important to see it go off, but I think it's more important to me personally for my playtesting. If I'm in your shoes watching, or if I'm in my own shoes testing, I'm a little bit more enthused at the start of this process to know how to get there than I am how to, finish it off once I get there. Once I think I get more practice with how to get there, then I think I'm a lot more interested in the mechanics of exactly what am I hoping to mill, what am I hoping to hit. I think you can kind of understand like the semantics of getting there right now is a little bit more important than, for me personally, since this is a deck for me, than what happens when I get there, and then we can learn that later. But let's get into playtest number 2 here. Keeping a 3-lander with Lotus Field, a pretty fun land. Just got that reprint in the Stellar side. It's got Soul Ring, Scoot Swarm, Nature's Rhythm can go get a creature of our choice from our library and put it on the battlefield. And then I really like Nature's Rhythm because it has Harmonized back out of our graveyard to go do it again. And then Dread Return to get a creature back. So I like Peatland into Soul Ring. My thought is Scootsworm and then play something like Lush Portico. Get the Insects, Surveil 1. I don't mind Toxic Deluge. Again, 1 mana off of Necrobloom, so I think we just play the Insect and get Necrobloom out this turn. Turn 3 doesn't feel bad at all. We've got a spare colorless laying around, but I don't really see a use for it. So now the question becomes, what is this turn? So I can get the Forest in. That's an Insect and a plant. I've got 6 mana. I could see going Nature's Rhythm for something like Ice Till Explorer, right? Something that's going to start opening up our graveyard because as soon as we play this Lotus Field, we got to sack a couple lands, and that'll then give us lands back out of our graveyard. So that's the first thought I can think of. Is just Nature's Lore for the Ice Till. There could be other better targets, but that's the first one that comes to mind for me. You could get Mossborn Hydra. We could get Tifa. We could get Mightforn Harvester. There's a lot of other creatures under 4 mana that I can think of. That's just what comes to my head. We could play an additional land this turn. Play the Fable Passage. Get the plant. Mill off of Ice Till. Sack the Fable Passage. I think we're looking at maybe a white source here just to even out our colors. Plant. Mill a card. So now we've got a couple key creatures in our library, in our graveyard. We see Chatterfang in the yard, something we might want to get back. But I think we're in a good spot here. We started to make the plans for Scootsworm's getting very close, just making copies of itself. So then as we come into our next turn, right, now you have the choice of, do you start playing these back out of our graveyard, especially something like the Fable Passage, which can then, double up those landfall triggers. Or do we get something like Lotus Field in and get a couple more pieces into the graveyard? We see Reprocess just got that great Secret Lair reprint. Sacrifice any number of artifacts, creatures, or lands and draw a card for each. Again, we've got a couple spare plants and insects we could probably give up to the recommission to draw a couple cards. I don't mind doing that. Like at minimum, I want to get rid of the insects. The question is, do I want to give up the plants? I guess if I Lotus Field, I'm going to get a couple of the... I guess I'm probably going to end up in zombies anyway. If I go 6 deep, that gets me 9. I can play 2 lands. Yeah, let's go 6 deep into Reprocess. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This leaves me 3 mana left and now a handful of cards. Love seeing Chocobo Racetrack, can start getting the birds. There's Tifa, can set up for next turn. There's Splendid Wreck, could be a nice way to, get some lands back. There's Cathar's Crusade, right? Good piece to get started going. Ramonat can get more out of my graveyard, but remember, I still have lands to play. So I'm trying to think of what makes the most sense. So I've used 1, 2, 4. So this is 3 mana left. Dartha comes in tapped. Lotus comes in tapped. Right? So either way, I'm not going to get mana there. But if I replay the Fable Passage out of my graveyard twice, I will get untapped lands in off of Fable Passage, which could get me Cathar's Crusade for next turn, which is kind of where my head's at. It'll just cause me to pitch down to hand size, and I don't think I mind doing that. Because my thought is Fable Passage triggers Ice Till to mill a card, makes us a plant, makes us a Scootsworm, because now we're at 6, right? Sack the Fable Passage, go get a land, comes in, Scooties, plant, mill a card. Okay, so we're going to make a ton of tokens this turn, but I think it's still going to be good for that Cathar's Crusade next turn, because it can threaten a lot. Land comes in, mill 1, 4 Scooties. This is going to be another plant, because we do have a double there on the name, so we're not going to get the zombie. Swamp, 8 Scooties, another plant. And then my thought is, now play the Cathar's Crusade. And now, if we untap with the board we're going to have, we're just in our opponent's in a world of hurt. Cathar's Crusade's just gonna go off, right? Because one land drop's gonna make 8 Scoots Worms, 8+8+8, and then there's our kind of combat, token victory. Let's go into playtest number 3 here. Keeping a 4-lander. We see Exploration Broodship there. We see Scape Shift, and we see Hogro. So not bad. We also have a land like Deceptive Landscape that can sacrifice itself. Same thing with the Windswept Heath. Let's try the Portico first and see what we see. We see Anguished Unmaking. Okay. Not a bad start. I think I get the Woodland in, get the Broodship down. Oh, I love the Dryad. It's unfortunate because I really don't want to play the extra lands off the Dryad, but I will crew the Broodship with it. I will station the Broodship with it. Again, we could play another land, but it feels awkward with all the value that's coming from all the other things I have. So I guess the question now is it Necrobloom or Hagra this turn? I think it's Necrobloom. Play the forest, play Necrobloom. We'll play the landscape, get a plant. The only downside, right, to the plants, right, is they're not going to be able to station the Broodship, right? But, both Dryad and Necrobloom can. So that's land number 2 for the turn. Get the Heath in. Plant. Again, we can sack these any time. The only thing stopping me from right now is I don't have any way to play lands from my graveyard, so I'm kind of wondering, do I keep them out for Scape Shift? Just to get more things from the graveyard. Because I feel like Scape Shifting next turn would be pretty fun. I'm just, 1 mana off being able to Hagra plus Scape Shift? Right, so there is a little bit of that thought. I do get to play an additional land this turn, I just don't have one to play. But again, I don't have any way to get one back from the graveyard, so I kind of want to hold firm here. It could be awkward if my next draw isn't a land, but I think ideally we need to find something that can play lands from our graveyard, and then I think we're just absolutely golden. So coming into turn 5, we unfortunately don't see a land, but we see Summon Titan, which lets us get stuff into our graveyard. So let me think about this. I can get Exploration Broodship up to 8 this turn, so maybe it's worth getting the Titan in. We have Green Warden, Excavator, Field of the Dead, Insidious Roots, and Scorpion. So there we go. We got 2 pieces that can get it back. We just don't have the mana for either of them, right? Because Broodship doesn't let you play it for free. It just lets you play that. So I think I would just get it up to its creature status. This is on that. And we get a... I think we might as well sack these, take the shuffle, get a couple more plants, right? Just kind of get some value in. I just realized I used the landscape. I used the landscape for Titan. So we'll say it's there. I'll go get that plains and say that it's what I got off the Heath, even though the Heath could have gotten something different. And then the hope here is now we can play something out of our graveyard next turn with the Broodship. Do we want to dredge is the next question. It's probably an argument there's no reason not to, especially for something like Field of the Dead to get it back in. It's a really useful card. So I'd say let's dredge the field from the Field of the Dead. Play the field. Field is going to trigger giving us a zombie. And then same thing with Necrobloom, right? Since that ability is similar between them. This would have gone off before. This would have gone off before. Titan would have gone off before any of this. So Titan brings all the lands from our graveyard back to the battlefield, which is right now just Windswept Heath. That is a zombie from Necrobloom. Field of the Dead, zombie. Right, I can crack Windswept Heath. Did it come in tapped? Comes in tapped. Never mind. So I've got 6 mana. which is enough to get Green Warden back, which is my thought. Green Warden can then play lands on my graveyard, but it also doubles up. It also doubles up the the land ETBs, which is my thought. So use the Brood Ship to play it. I'll sack I guess Windswept Heath to play the Green Warden, right? Now we can play lands off our graveyard. If a land comes in, it doubles up. We've only had one land drop this turn, which I believe was the Field of the Dead. So we could play the Windswept Heath back out of our graveyard. That's 4 more zombies, 2 from field, 2 from Necrobloom. And then we can sack the Windswept Heath to go get really just about anything. I mean, we could go for our Triome if we want to. 4 more zombies. Now I think the answer is something like we did see that Phyrexian Altar in our graveyard we can go get. If we want to start sacking them for some real value. But I mean, now Titan's just going to make something absolutely brutal next turn. Remember that Brood Ship is in the air, so I mean, it could be a threat target. We could make Necrobloom a threat. But my other thought is now Scapeshift could just be a real threat next turn because we have, 8 lands on the battlefield? We could put Hagra down, Scapeshift for 8. 8 lands go to the graveyard, 8 come in, double triggers because of Green Warden, so everybody's losing 16. And then something's getting a huge buff from the Titan. And that could be interesting. You could then start replaying your lands back out of your graveyard because of the Green Warden. You never know what you find, off the top deck here that could make this board state even more brutal. Because that's my thought, right? Is you just Hagra, Scapeshift your board away. Sorry, the Titan goes off, giving +8/+8 and trample to something. I guess you just pick something like Green Warden or the Brood Ship. But again, you Scapeshift 8 lands away, you get 8 back. You've got two lands to play out of your graveyard. 3, right? 1 for turn, 1 for Dryad, 1 for Brood Ship. And you're getting more Hagra targets. So it's 16 off of Scapeshift, and then 6 more off your normal land drops. That's 22 Hagra triggers just on this turn alone. And that's if we don't then go try to find something to get them all back again. We could, I think this pretty much shows where we're trying to go, right, with this line of thinking. But I'd love to know, what do you think of Necrobloom down in the comment section below. It's a really interesting deck. I'm excited to start trying it for myself. I'm really at the point now where I'm trying to decide is it worth trying to pursue another deck for this idea of the Necrobloom, or is it worth trying to mold Taval kind of into what I want it to be? The only reason I really like the Necrobloom, truthfully, well, as a tokens player, is some of the white access we have here. Elspeth. Elspeth on Wings of Gold, Cathar's Crusade. These things that can make the tokens like really relevant that I just feel like Taval doesn't specifically care about, which is why I kind of want to do it that way. Playing things like Chatterfang and Kumbal and things like that. Just trying to have some fun. So I'm going to be testing this one on my own. If you're interested in seeing how my Necrobloom deck evolves over time, just I'll be doing future videos on the channel. But thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you all next.